The world of Caliban was a feudal death world located within Segmentum Obscurus that, prior to its destruction, served as the homeworld of the Dark Angels Legion of the Legione Astartes. The world was infamous for having most of its landmass covered in dense forest, with only the mountain and coastal regions being able to afford one a view of an open horizon. These forests were home to a number of dangerous predatory organisms, such as raptors, bears, lions, and even the dreaded monstrosities that were known simply as the Great Beasts. Should rumors arise of one of these beasts terrorizing a human settlement, then a warrior from one of Caliban's many knightly orders may choose to declare a quest against such a monstrous adversary. The knight would then travel to the site of the beast's rampage in order to slay the creature, and if successful, he would not only save many innocent lives, but also gain a measure of fame and glory as a result. While the great beasts were undoubtedly the most malicious of the forest's inhabitants, they were far from being the only such unusual creatures to call the forest their home. In addition to the great beasts, there also existed a race of unusual yet seemingly benevolent creatures that dwelled within the forests of Caliban. These beings would be known to the Calibanites simply as the Watchers in the Dark. The Watchers in the Dark, while viewed by some as being little more than creatures of myth and folklore, are a mysterious race that were revered by many of Caliban's more isolated and superstitious towns and villages, who claimed that the Watchers were the guardian spirits of the forest. Many settlements would leave gifts and offerings to these beings in hopes that the Watchers would keep them safe from the attentions of the great beasts that roamed the land. When they would make their presence known, an event which in itself was an incredibly rare occurrence, even before Caliban's destruction, the Watchers would appear as diminutive humanoids that were cloaked in heavy robes that covered their entire body, with their faces being obscured by the shadows of their hoods. It was even said that, should one gaze into the darkness that obscured a Watcher's face, then that person would be driven to madness. The Watchers are said to be utterly silent, but are capable of communicating to others by utilizing a form of telepathy. Following the destruction of Caliban, which occurred shortly after the events of the Horus Heresy, a number of Watchers in the Dark would begin to appear upon the last surviving fragment of the world, the Dark Angel's Fortress Monastery, the Rock. It is even said that, at the heart of the Rock, within a hidden chamber, the Watchers in the Dark stand sentinel over the slumbering form of the Dark Angel's Primarch, Lionel Johnson. The Watchers are incredibly intelligent creatures, and have been known to assist the warriors of the modern-day Dark Angels chapter by carrying weapons or artifacts of significance for members of the chapter, even though they do not aid the Astartes directly in battle. In fact, it would be the Watchers in the Dark who would bestow the relics of the Lion Helm and the Sword of Secrets to the current Supreme Grand Master of the chapter, Azrael. Despite being highly xenophobic, even by the standards of many other Space Marine chapters, the Dark Angels tolerate, even if they may not acknowledge the presence, of the Watchers in the Dark, and allow the diminutive creatures to come and go as they please. Novitiates of the chapter are warned upon their induction to never interfere with the Watchers, leading to tales being told of battle brothers who ignored these warnings before vanishing without a trace, surrounding these shadowy beings with an air of mystique and menace. But just what exactly are the Watchers in the Dark? One possibility is that the Watchers are simply a humanoid species that evolved prior to humanity's arrival upon Caliban, with any physical similarities that the race might share with humanity simply being a result of convergent evolution. This would even be somewhat implied within the novel Descent of Angels, when Zahariel, a would-be knight of the Order, would encounter the Watchers in the Dark during his quest to slay the beast of Endriago. Zahariel would come to the assumption that the Watchers are indeed something other than human, to which one of the Watchers would respond with the following.
Correct. We are the species unknown to the majority of your race.
The Watchers themselves would also appear to be a highly psychic species. This is not only demonstrated by their telepathic capabilities, but also their ability to seemingly teleport by melting into the shadows, and the fact that they can instinctively recognize beings that demonstrate some measure of psychic potential. However, despite appearing as being little more than a psychically sensitive race of diminutive Xenos, the Watchers have been documented displaying many extraordinary traits that are somewhat unusual compared to most other sentient races. Most notably, despite being a species that demonstrates a degree of psychic capability, the Watchers also seem to project a negative warp presence, similar to the soulless blanks of the human species, such as the Sisters of Silence or the agents of the Calexis Temple of the Officio Assassinorum. Within the novel Legacy of Russ, the demon known as the Changeling would briefly encounter one of the Watchers in the dark within the rock. To the Changeling, the Watcher was described as being an intangible black void, only being visible to the demon's warp site not by gazing upon the creature's soul, but instead due to the absence of the warp surrounding the Watcher that betrayed its presence. The negative warp presence projected by the Watcher was so potent that the Changeling found itself feeling an indefinable, icy discomfort, a sensation that was as close to fear that the demon was capable of experiencing. Unusually for blank-like entities, the Watchers are still capable of manifesting a degree of psychic ability, as demonstrated by their telepathic communication. Admittedly, though, it is theoretically possible that the psychic abilities demonstrated by the Watchers in the dark are the result of some unknown biological process, as opposed to being derived from the warp itself. The Watchers in the dark also appear to display an inherent resentment towards the power and influence of chaos. This hatred is not just limited to those corrupted by the taint of chaos, but has even been shown to extend to individuals that display a strong yet oblivious connection to the warp, such as latent psychers. The latter was demonstrated within Descent of Angels when Zahariel, who at the time was oblivious to his own latent psychic potential, first encountered the Watchers.
He carries the taint within him. Best to kill him now.
The Watchers in the Dark also claimed to be part of a cabal that had dedicated itself towards combating against the ruinous powers. It's implied through this specific choice of wording that the Watchers worked as part of the Xenos organization known as the Cabal that had sought to engineer a specific outcome to the Horus Heresy in order to end the threat of chaos completely, by ultimately bringing about the extinction of the human species. Because of the Watchers seeking to combat against the powers of chaos, even after the fact that many of the Cabal's more notable members, such as Garhet, Slaudar, and Daemon Prytanis, would be slain by the Eldari Farseer Eldrad Ulthran and the loyalist word-bearer Bathuza Narek, is it possible that the Watchers themselves were a species that were originally engineered by the Cabal itself, which was intended to act as a weapon to help bring about the fall of chaos, or at the very least, continue to stand against it? While the Cabal was comprised of individuals from a number of different species, including Eldari, human, and Slan, the Watchers that Zahariel encountered claimed that their race was part of a Cabal as opposed to merely these individual Watchers. Since the power of chaos is, by its very nature, of the warp, which in turn can be nullified by those that display a negative warp presence, as demonstrated by the Watchers themselves, in addition to the fact that blanks are an extremely rare phenomena, at the very least within the human species, it would certainly seem unusual for a race that is comprised entirely of blanks to evolve through natural means. Admittedly, however, such an occurrence, while somewhat improbable, is by no means impossible. But another hypothesis that exists regarding the Watchers in the Dark is that they are some type of benevolent warp entity, a type of, for lack of a better term, demonic creature that exists in opposition to the more malevolent beings that dwell within the Immaterium. Given Caliban's close proximity to the Eye of Terror, and the amount of chaotic taint that existed upon the world, as evident with the existence of the great beasts and implied Nurglite corruption of many acres of Caliban's forests, it would not be unreasonable to assume that the Watchers are themselves a type of demonic entity. The fact that a Watcher's true face is said to drive those who gaze upon it to madness could also support this possibility, as the very appearance of many demonic creatures has been known to push even those with the strongest of wills to the brink of insanity. There is also the fact that the Watchers are said to be incapable of being harmed through traditional means. Many types of demons also display remarkable resilience, with only the energies of the warp or the nullifying aura of blanks being capable of truly harming them in most circumstances. The idea that the Watchers originate from the Immaterium would appear to be supported within the novella Dreadwing, with the following passage.
The other Watchers stood in silent observation, witnessing the fall of what the humans, placed in their charge by pure chance, had called Aldorok. None of them were truly present. Their existence was not limited by time or place in such a fashion, nor was their true form that of the cult diminutive by which they visited this corporeal dimension even when unobserved. They were creatures of ritual and habit, not unlike the human culture that, through infrequent intervention, they had incidentally cultivated over 15,000 years.
It is incredibly important to note that within the warp, time, unrestrained by the laws of reality, is capable of travelling backwards, forwards, bending, and standing still simultaneously, and demonic creatures are also unconfined to the laws of physics regarding the forms that they take, leading to many entities adopting an appearance that would be impossible to maintain for long within real space. A second passage from this novella would also appear to reiterate how the Watchers themselves are outside the confines of time.
The Watchers were silent as they considered the possible outcomes of their inactions. Theirs was not a linear continuum. Time was mosaic, three-dimensional, and beautiful. Too much for any one set of eyes, however studied, to interpret as a complete image.
Since the entities that dwell within the warp, along with the warp itself, are unrestricted by the laws of time and space, this would appear to support the notion that the Watchers are indeed some type of benevolent warp-spawned entity. The idea that the Watchers are creatures of the warp could indeed explain the way they mysteriously appear and disappear from view, which could be due to the Watchers being, for lack of a better term, summoned into real space before fading back into the warp. The fact that the Watchers are demonstrated as altering their perceived appearance would also seem to support this possibility, as many demonic creatures are also shown to be capable of adopting various guises. Such examples include the previously mentioned Changeling, as well as the Slaneshi demon known as Nakari, who has taken the forms of a bull-headed monstrosity, a beautiful Eldari female, and that of an obese version of the demon Primarch, Fulgrim. Many demons also display a degree of psychic capability in a number of disciplines, such as pyromancy and telepathy, and the Watchers, as stated earlier, have also been documented to be psychers in their own right. However, given the fact that the Watchers also display an aura of nullification around them, it would seem somewhat unfeasible that a being comprised of warp energy could produce an aura that nullifies said energy without banishing itself back into the depths of warp space as soon as it manifests within the material realm. Nonetheless, whatever the truth of the matter, the Watchers in the Dark will continue to be a mysterious force that will aid the Dark Angels for millennia to come. What do you think the Watchers in the Dark are? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.